Every Monday morning, long before the Arizona sun climbed over the red dirt hills, the gravel outside the gun range would crunch under the weight of a familiar pair of boots. There was no fanfare, no music from the parking lot, just a quiet rhythm, measured, deliberate, like the footsteps of a man who'd walked this path 1,000 times. He came alone, always at 6:45 a.m., and never late. He wore the same thing every week, a flannel shirt faded from the desert sun, dark jeans stiff with old dust, and a tan baseball cap pulled low over his face. His name on the sign-in sheet was always the same too, K. Charles, written in a steady hand. No last name, no ID, no questions. The staff didn't press. They called him the guy from Lane 7, the quiet one, the one who paid in cash and didn't say much. He wasn't there to make friends. He wasn't there to prove anything. When he walked through the corridor, past the vending machine, past the bulletin board full of tactical weekend flyers, he didn't look around. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just moved like a man with a purpose. Lane 7 was his. No one else wanted it. The fluorescent light above flickered, and the wall behind was stained with dust and time. But that didn't bother him. He preferred it that way. Less noise, fewer eyes. He laid out his gear like it was sacred. A small pistol case worn smooth at the corners, a half-used box of .45 ACP rounds, a thermos with a few fresh dings since the last visit. No stickers, no slogans, no flashy gear. Just the tools of someone who'd been doing this long before the world started filming everything. When he opened the case, the pistol inside was a steel gray 1911, old, unpolished, and perfect. Paint wear on the slide told stories no one dared to ask about. He loaded 5 rounds, stepped into position, and stared downrange without a word. He wasn't training, he wasn't practicing, he was remembering. The first 3 shots cracked through the silence. Then a pause, 2 more. Each one hit the center. The man in Lane 7 didn't flinch, didn't celebrate. He simply stepped back, unloaded, and began again, a rhythm only he seemed to understand. The stillness of the range was broken that morning not by gunfire, but by laughter. Young, sharp, and just loud enough to slice through the quiet. The front door buzzed, and in came a small storm of noise. 5 recruits, all wearing Navy SEAL prep shirts, duffel bags slung over their shoulders, their energy loud and unfiltered. The leader of the group was tall and broad, early 20s, with a kind of natural swagger that came from being the best in every room he walked into. His name, at least the one stitched onto his sleeve, was Logan. He led the others, Finn, Cruz, Mason, and Tyler, like a captain commands a crew, loud, confident, and unchallenged. They didn't notice the man already standing at Lane 7. Or maybe they did, but they didn't care. To them, he looked like someone who should be stacking ammo in the back, not someone worth attention. The flannel shirt, the worn jeans, the silence. It didn't fit their world of competitive banter and overconfident testosterone. "Place is dead," Mason said as he dropped his bag on Lane 5. "Except for the scarecrow down there," Finn chuckled, nodding toward Keanu. "Probably one of those doomsday YouTubers, teaching conspiracy theories and wilderness survival." The group laughed, unaware of the stillness they were disturbing. Keanu didn't move. He didn't react. He pressed the slide forward on his 1911, locked it into place with the quiet precision of a man who had done it thousands of times, and kept going. Cruz, always the one with something smart to say, added, "I bet he blesses every round before he fires." More laughter followed. None of them noticed the rhythm yet. They were too busy making jokes, boasting about shot groups and qualification scores. Logan stepped into Lane 4, fired 5 rounds rapid, then turned to the others, smirking. "Tight grouping. I'm ready for quals already." Tyler clapped him on the back. Finn was already digging into his gear, eager to show off next. But Lane 7 kept ticking. 3 shots, pause. 2 shots, pause. The same pattern. Not rushed, not lazy, just inevitable. It wasn't loud, it didn't demand attention, but it commanded it. Slowly, almost unconsciously, the group began to shoot less and watch more. At first, it was just because they noticed the man hadn't missed once. Then it became something else. They started tracking his cadence, noticing the consistency. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't correct. He didn't even seem to care if he was being watched. He shot like he was alone in the world. And for the first time, Logan wasn't sure if he was the best shooter in the room. A silence crept in, not awkward, not forced, but respectful. It came slowly, like mist rolling in over warm asphalt. Even the instructors near the back leaned slightly forward, curious. Lane 7 wasn't just another range bay anymore. It had become something else, a place where noise couldn't reach, where performance didn't matter, where only precision lived. The group didn't know his name yet. They didn't know what he'd done, who he'd been, or what brought him there every Monday before the sun. But in that moment, as Keanu calmly reloaded his magazine without fanfare or frustration, they began to understand something no class had ever taught them. There's a difference between looking dangerous and truly being it. Logan wasn't used to being ignored, especially not in a place like this where the air practically buzzed with testosterone and competition. Back on base, at the gym, in quals, he was the one people noticed, the one they watched, envied, and tried to beat. But now, something was happening that made his chest tighten in a way he didn't understand. He hadn't looked at them once. But he had changed the entire energy in the room, not by doing more, but by doing less. Less noise, less motion, less ego. And yet, somehow, all eyes had begun to shift his way. It was the shooting that did it. It wasn't flashy or fast. It wasn't the sort of thing you filmed for your buddies. It was clean. Devastatingly clean. 5 rounds, spaced with discipline, grouped so tight you could cover them with a silver dollar, again and again. Same tempo, same breath. Like a man who wasn't aiming so much as remembering. Even Cruz had stopped joking. Tyler's smirk had faded, and Finn, usually the first to crack wise, was staring at the silhouette target with something like disbelief. It wasn't just skill. It was something colder, quieter, like a reminder from a time before they were born that real danger doesn't make noise. It just waits. Logan tried to brush it off. He adjusted his grip, fired a new group, tried to focus. But his last 3 shots dipped right. One clipped the edge of the paper. His frustration spiked. He pulled off his ear pro and turned, peeking toward lane 7. The man hadn't flinched. Still there, still perfect, still acting like none of them existed. Logan's pride bristled. He cleared his throat and raised his voice just enough to cut through the background. "Hey, old-timer," he said casually with that slow smile of someone about to win a game they invented. "You any good with that thing? Or just real consistent at pretending?" No one laughed. Not really. Cruz smirked, but it didn't stick. Finn raised an eyebrow. Keanu didn't respond. Not right away. He ejected his mag, checked the chamber with the slow calm of someone performing a ritual, not a task. Then he looked up. His eyes met Logan's. Not aggressive, not smug, just still. Watching. Weighing. The kind of look that made your own confidence shrink just a little. Logan pressed on. He needed to take control of the room again. "How about a little friendly challenge?" he said, louder this time. "You and me, 5 shots, closest grouping wins, 1 shot at glory." He grinned, stepping back to let the others take in the show. Tyler murmured something under his breath. Cruz leaned forward. It felt like something big was about to happen. Keanu said nothing, but slowly he reached into his duffel and pulled out a plain paper target. No scoring rings, no grids, just a single black silhouette. He walked it downrange himself, clipped it in place at 15 yards, and returned to his lane without looking at anyone. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Logan loaded his Glock. He took his stance. Shoulders square, breath steady, jaw set. He could feel his own heart now thudding harder than it should, 5 shots. The sound cracked in the stillness. His grouping was solid. Tight, low left, not perfect but definitely good. He stepped back, turned to the others. Finn nodded. Cruz gave him a quiet, impressed look. "Nice," Tyler whispered. Then came the second part. Keanu didn't change expression. He simply stepped up, calm as ever. Same stance, same breath. 5 shots. 1, pause. 2, pause. 2 more. The range fell silent. All eyes turned to the target. At first, no one spoke. Then Tyler whispered, "Is that one hole?" It was. No scatter, no flyers, just one ragged hole, torn slightly at the edges from heat and friction, but unmistakably single. The kind of grouping you don't practice into existence. You earn it through decades, through necessity. Logan stared. He couldn't look away. His own target, once a badge of pride, suddenly looked amateur. He didn't speak. Couldn't. And Keanu? He had already reloaded and returned to his rhythm. 3 shots, pause. 2 shots, pause. No celebration, no acknowledgement, just presence. The silence in the room had changed. It wasn't uncertain anymore. It was reverent. Logan felt it settle on his shoulders like something he didn't know he was carrying. He glanced around. His friends weren't smirking. They weren't whispering. They were just watching. And so was he. Not just because Keanu was good, but because in the span of a few minutes he had shown them all that mastery doesn't come with noise. It comes with silence, and still, and time. Logan holstered his Glock slowly. His hands, for the first time that day, didn't feel steady. He had come here to lead, to dominate, but instead he had just learned something he wouldn't forget for the rest of his life, that the most dangerous man in the room is the one who has nothing to prove. Reggie's fingers clenched slightly around the grip of his Glock as he stared down the range at the target in lane 7. 1 hole. That's all. Not 5 scattered impacts, not even a tight cluster. Just one perfectly centered, torn-edge circle where all 5 bullets had entered and vanished. It looked almost unreal, but the words wouldn't form. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a trick. This was something ancient, something earned, something he didn't yet understand. Keanu didn't look at him. He didn't nod. He didn't acknowledge the result at all. He just calmly unloaded his mag, checked the chamber, set the pistol on the bench, and reached for his dented old thermos like nothing had happened. Like perfection was just part of the ritual. And maybe for him it was. Reggie stood frozen behind the red line, his heart thumping in his ears. The other guys, Cruz, Finn, Tyler, and Mason, stood back, quiet now, all eyes on Keanu. No more laughing, no more taunts, no more swagger. The air had shifted into something heavier, like a storm passing through the room, but instead of rain, it brought revelation. Petty, the youngest of them, now just a wide-eyed kid named Finn again, leaned in to whisper, "Yo, did you see that? 1 hole. Dude's not normal." Tyler nodded, slowly. "I don't think that was just muscle memory. That was something else." Mason muttered, "Who the hell is this guy?" And then it happened. Reggie saw it first. The brim of Keanu's cap tilted back slightly as he adjusted his stance again, just enough to catch the light from above, just enough for the shadows to fall away from his face. For a second, just one, Reggie saw him, really saw him. The square jawline, the graying at the temples, the deep-set, steady eyes. His breath caught. "No way," he whispered. "That's Keanu Reeves." The name cracked the silence like a match to dry leaves. The guys turned to look again, really look. And this time they saw it too. Not the man from movie posters or red carpets, not Neo or John Wick, or that soft-spoken actor who disappeared from the press every few years. This was someone else entirely. Someone older, harder, quieter. Someone who'd seen more than he ever talked about. Cruz took a half step back. "Wait, are you serious?" Reggie nodded, still not breaking eye contact with the man in the flannel. "That's him. I swear." Keanu finally looked up and met his gaze, not with surprise, not with arrogance, just that same calm, unflinching observation that had gutted every ounce of bravado Reggie had carried into the range. For a moment they stood there, connected by nothing but silence and the truth of what had just unfolded. "You're him, aren't you?" Reggie asked, barely above a whisper. Keanu set the thermos down. Then, with the faintest of nods, and a voice so soft it barely rose above the hum of the vents, he replied, "I was." The weight of those two words slammed into Reggie's chest harder than any drill instructor ever had. Not "I am," not "you're right," just a quiet, settled truth that held more power than any declaration. And with that, Keanu turned back toward the lane, reloaded 5 more rounds with the same calm efficiency, and resumed. 3 shots, pause. 2 shots, pause. As if the conversation hadn't happened. As if the storm had passed and now the ritual could continue. Reggie didn't move. His Glock felt heavier now. He stared down at his own target. 5 decent hits, low left, proud moments ago, and felt suddenly small. He looked at Keanu's again, still just 1 hole, still perfect, still smoking slightly at the edge from the heat. He wasn't angry. He wasn't embarrassed. What he felt was something else entirely. Something rarer. Respect. The kind you don't give freely, but that demands to be earned in silence. Behind him, the rest of the guys slowly stepped back into their lanes. No one said it out loud, but the noise was gone. The jokes were gone. They weren't there to compete anymore. They were there to observe, to learn, to understand what it meant to be truly in control, not of others, not of the room, but of yourself. Reggie turned his head slightly, watching the way Keanu's hands moved, deliberate, steady, like every part of him was connected to that weapon in a way no lesson could teach. It was like watching an old craftsman work a lathe, or a sculptor turn raw stone into grace. No wasted motion, no explanation, just mastery, lived quietly. In that moment, Reggie realized something he hadn't known he'd needed to learn, that strength wasn't in shouting, in outperforming, in conquering. Sometimes, the most powerful presence in the room is the one that doesn't demand anything at all. And as Keanu fired his final round and stepped back once more, the range stood still, not out of fear, not out of awe, but out of the deep human understanding that they had just witnessed something rare, a lesson, unspoken, but unforgettable. The following Monday, the air felt different before the range even opened. There was no posted announcement, no scheduled event, yet somehow everyone who mattered showed up early. The parking lot filled faster than usual, boots crunching gravel with quiet purpose. Inside, the staff moved differently, more focused, less talkative. The Bluetooth speaker that usually pumped out rock music was off. The fluorescent lights still flickered, but no one complained. Everyone just seemed to know, instinctively, that today wasn't like every other day. It was quieter, more still. At exactly 6:34 a.m., the security door buzzed open, and in walked Keanu Reeves. Same flannel shirt, same worn jeans, same tan cap pulled low. He walked with that same slow, sure pace, the rhythm of someone who didn't need to hurry because he'd already learned the value of time. He nodded briefly to the man at the front desk, something he hadn't done before, and signed in, K. Charles. Like always, no one asked for ID, no one needed to. This time, even without the name, they all recognized him. When he walked past the center lanes, the usual regulars stepped aside without being asked. A couple of them offered polite nods, not out of fame chasing, but out of quiet respect. No one said his name out loud. They didn't have to. He was already more than that. Lane 7 had changed. It had been cleaned, polished, the bench no longer wobbled, the wall behind it had been scrubbed, and on the divider just above where a shooter might rest their elbow, a small brass plaque had been carefully mounted. It read simply, reserved until he says otherwise. No rank, no title, no credits, just space and reverence. Keanu didn't react when he saw it. He didn't smile, didn't pause, didn't even blink. He just set down his gear the same way he always did. A simple pistol case, a battered thermos, a soft rag, and a fresh box of ammo. He took a breath. Then he started. 3 shots, pause. 2 shots, pause. Reset. The rhythm hadn't changed, but the audience had. A few feet behind the red line stood Reggie. Not swaggering this time, not showing off. Just watching, hands at his sides, expression calm. With him were Cruz, Finn, and Mason, all standing a respectful distance behind. Not there to compete anymore. They had come to learn, without asking. They didn't speak. They didn't film. They just watched. After Keanu's second reload, Reggie stepped forward slowly, careful not to cross the line. In his hand, he held a fresh box of 45 ACP rounds. He didn't raise it like an offering. He didn't try to make it sentimental. He just held it out, steady and quiet. "I figured," he said softly, 30 wouldn't be enough today." Keanu paused mid-movement. His eyes dropped to the box, then rose to meet Reggie's. The silence stretched, not awkward, but deliberate. Then Keanu gave a slow, real nod. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't performative, but everyone behind Reggie saw it. It meant something. It meant everything. Reggie stepped back without another word. The others watched, standing taller now, straighter. Not out of fear, but out of presence. Something about this place had shifted. Keanu continued his rhythm, undisturbed, and yet everything he did now felt amplified. Not because he wanted attention, but because every breath, every movement was teaching without instruction. Around the range, other shooters began to lower their voices. Even instructors turned their eyes more frequently toward Lane 7, adjusting their lessons. Their tone, no one dared talk over the sound of Keanu's shots. They cut through the room not like thunder, but like punctuation. Precise, final, grounded in something few understood. He wasn't there to be a leader, but leaders don't always choose their roles. Sometimes they're chosen by how they carry themselves when no one's watching, and even more when everyone is. As the hour passed, the atmosphere grew reverent. Shooters came and went, but all made note of the plaque. Some paused to read it. Some simply nodded toward it. Everyone understood. And Keanu? He just kept going. 3 shots. 2 shots. Reset. His stance never wavered. His breath never faltered. He drank from his thermos, wiped the slide with the same old cloth, and never once looked to see who was watching. And yet, everyone was. Reggie didn't shoot that day. He didn't need to. He just stood behind the red line, ammo box now empty on the bench, and let the sound of quiet mastery do what no drill instructor ever could. He thought about all the times he'd tried to prove himself through volume, through flash, through swagger, and how none of it had ever taught him what Keanu just had, without a single command, without a single boast. It wasn't about the gun. It wasn't even about the shot. It was about the way you show up, the way you stand still, the way you keep doing the work, especially when no one gives you credit, especially when they laugh, especially when the world forgets. That day, Lane 7 wasn't just a spot on the range. It became a symbol, a place where noise bowed to discipline, where strength didn't shout, where the loudest man in the room wasn't the one speaking. He was the one shooting, quietly, perfectly, still. The next morning, another small change appeared at Lane 7. A second brass plaque, just beneath the first, no bigger than a postcard. It had no name, no credits, just 5 quiet words etched in capital letters. Respect is earned in silence. No one claimed to have put it there. No one asked who approved it. But no one questioned it either. It belonged there, like it always had. Keanu returned the same way he always did, boots crunching gravel at 6:44 a.m., his presence as reliable as the Arizona sun waiting to rise. He signed in with the same name, K. Charles, nodded to the front desk, and walked the length of the range without glancing around. But something had shifted, not in him, but in everyone else. The moment he stepped inside, conversations dimmed. Even the casual clatter of gear being unzipped took on a softer rhythm. No one was told to quiet down, they just did. At lane 7, Keanu placed his gear in the same sequence. His battered thermos, his soft rag, a small box of .45 ACP rounds. He laid out the same 1911 pistol, steel gray, worn, elegant in its simplicity. No attachments, no optics, just the weapon and his hands. The ceremony didn't change. Behind the red line stood Reggie and the others, Cruz, Finn, Mason. No gloves, no boastful stances. They didn't treat the space like a proving ground anymore. They treated it like something closer to sacred. They didn't speak unless they had to, and when they did, it was in low tones, like they were inside a chapel. The instructors noticed it too. They didn't interrupt or try to take over. They let it be. Some even drifted closer to lane 7 themselves, not to correct or coach, but to observe. It had become a quiet epicenter, not because Keanu demanded it, but because he didn't. That morning, Reggie stepped up again, not to challenge, but to offer. He had brought a fresh box of ammo, same brand, same caliber. He didn't say anything as he placed it on the bench. Keanu looked down, glanced at the label, and gave a small, appreciative nod. Reggie stayed to the side, watching Keanu's hands move. There was something about the way his fingers loaded each round, measured, calm, like he wasn't just preparing a magazine but telling a story. And every shot that followed was part of the same sentence, punctuated by precision. You could see the difference. It wasn't about the paper targets anymore. It was about presence, focus, the art of mastery when no one's watching, and especially when they are. At one point, Mason leaned in toward Reggie, whispering, "He doesn't flinch at all." Reggie didn't respond right away. He watched another series of shots land dead center, a hole growing darker with every pass. The others nodded. Even Finn, who had once laughed the loudest, now stood with arms crossed, lips pressed tight, watching like a student at a dojo. He didn't need to be told this was a master class. He felt it. Eventually, Keanu sat, as he always did, elbows resting on his knees, thermos cradled in both hands. He stared downrange, not at the target, but somewhere beyond it, like he was watching something the rest of them couldn't see. Reggie, after a long silence, stepped closer again. He didn't cross the red line. He just stood nearby, mirroring Keanu's posture without meaning to. "You ever think about teaching?" he asked softly, just above a whisper. Keanu didn't answer right away. His breath was slow, his gaze steady. Finally, he replied, "I spent years trying to forget everything I'd teach." That line hung in the air between them, like a shadow cast by something invisible. Reggie nodded slowly, understanding more than he could say. "But some things," Keanu continued, voice low and gravelly, "you don't teach. You just absorb them, quietly, over time." "That's why I'm still listening," Reggie said. Keanu turned to look at him, a near smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Then don't talk so much," he said. It wasn't harsh, it wasn't mocking, it was real, and Reggie laughed, genuinely, softly. It felt good, it felt earned. A few minutes later, Keanu stood and packed his gear with the same practiced order. But this time, he left behind the full box of ammo Reggie had brought, untouched, sitting neatly on the bench like a bookmark in a lesson still unfolding. As the others gathered their things, Reggie paused one last time to look at the target. 5 shots, 1 hole, no noise, no performance, just the truth staring back like a mirror. The next day, someone polished the second plaque. They didn't change the words. They didn't need to. The week passed quietly, but something had shifted. Not just in Reggie or the other recruits, but in the entire atmosphere of the range. It wasn't the kind of shift that came with announcements or posters. It was subtle, the kind you feel in your chest more than you notice with your eyes. There was less noise now, fewer sarcastic jabs echoing between stalls. Even the staff seemed to move with a different energy, more mindful, more present. Lane 7 remained untouched, except by one man, and though he never asked for it, that corner of the range had become a kind of silent ground zero for something deeper than marksmanship. Keanu came in like always, 6:44 IEM, flannel sleeves rolled to his elbows, boots coated in dust, thermos in hand. His face was unreadable as ever, carrying that stillness that made people instinctively quieter in his presence. When he signed in under the same alias, K. Charles, the man at the front desk no longer looked down to verify it. He simply nodded, quietly, like a soldier greeting an officer without rank. Keanu nodded back, not out of formality, but respect. Then he walked toward Lane 7, each step as consistent as his grouping. This time, however, something different waited for him. A small, folded piece of paper resting beneath the first brass plaque. No one claimed to have left it, but no one dared remove it either. Keanu paused, picked it up, and opened it slowly. Inside was a note, written in sharp, careful handwriting. "We looked you up. You saved more people than we can count. Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like." There was no signature. He didn't smile, but his hand stilled for a moment. Then, as always, he placed the note carefully in his bag, unfolded his gear, and began again. The ritual remained unchanged. That morning, the young men didn't shoot right away. Reggie, Cruz, Finn, and Mason stood behind the red line like they were waiting for permission to approach a master craftsman at work. Eventually they did, one by one, but not as a group this time, not as teammates or soldiers. They came individually, like students, like people with something to learn. Finn approached first, hands behind his back, eyes on the floor. "Sir," he said, his voice barely audible, "we looked you up." Keanu didn't respond right away. He just turned slightly, one brow raised, giving the kid space to find his words. "You saved a lot of people," Finn added, "more than we'll ever meet." After a long pause, Keanu replied, "They saved each other." It wasn't humility, it was truth, spoken without decoration. Finn nodded once, then stepped back quietly. Then Mason came forward, followed by Cruz. They didn't say much, just offered small nods, quiet acknowledgments of the kind that live longer in the soul than applause ever could. And finally Reggie stood beside him, not too close, not imposing, just present. They stared down the range together in silence, both of them leaning slightly forward, elbows on knees, eyes distant. Not the shots, not the scores. Something bigger had taken hold. After a while, Reggie asked, "You ever think about teaching for real?" His voice was soft, casual, but sincere. Keanu exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that carries memory. "I spent years," he said, "trying to forget everything I'd teach." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Reggie understood. They all did. The things that matter most aren't always the things you can put into curriculum. Sometimes they're the things that live in the silence between moments, in the restraint between action and reaction. Some things, Keanu continued, you don't teach. You absorb them, quietly, over time. Reggie smiled faintly. "That's why I'm still listening." Keanu turned just enough to look him in the eye. "Then don't talk so much." It wasn't meant as a put-down, it was a reminder, a joke with a backbone of steel. They both laughed, briefly, quietly, genuinely. Then Keanu stood, stretched his back, and began packing up his gear. Before he left, he placed one final round on the bench, a single .45 bullet, polished, untouched, a mark, a gesture. Not of dominance, but of completion. The rest of the guys didn't follow him out. They stayed, watching him go like you watch the last few moments of a sunset before the horizon swallows it. No one wanted to break the spell, and when the door finally buzzed shut behind him, the silence remained, heavy and whole. Later that afternoon, a staff member noticed the paper target from Lane 7 still hanging, perfectly centered, perfectly punched. Instead of taking it down, he laminated it and mounted it on the back wall of the office, just above the coffee pot. Someone wrote underneath in marker, "1 hole, 5 shots, 1 lesson." No signature, no name, none needed. The next Monday came with no announcement, no invitation, and yet the room felt fuller, more aware. There were no cameras, no reporters, no curious strangers, just the regulars, the staff, the young men who used to laugh louder than they listened. Everyone knew by now, not just who Keanu Reeves was, but what he represented. Lane 7 had become something more than a stall. It was a presence. It was discipline without shouting, strength without arrogance. And every time the security door buzzed and he walked in, the entire range shifted. Heads turned, not to stare, but to acknowledge. That morning, Keanu arrived exactly on time, as always, 6:44 a.m. Same boots, same cap, same faded flannel shirt. He moved like clockwork, but not mechanical. More like ritual. Like someone who found a kind of peace in routine that the world outside could never understand. As he approached the counter, the man behind the desk didn't speak. Keanu signed, K. Charles, placed his ID face down out of habit even though no one checked it anymore, and moved on toward his usual place. Lane 7 had been freshly wiped down. The brass plaques gleamed. Someone had placed a folded American flag on the bench for no reason other than respect. Keanu paused for a moment, gave it a nod, not dramatic, not performative, then gently moved it aside and began laying out his gear. Thermos, rag, pistol case, everything in the same order, same touch, nothing flashy, just repetition forged in something deeper than routine. Reggie was already there that morning, early for once, leaning against the far wall with a fresh box of .45 ammo under one arm. Cruz and Mason stood beside him. Finn sat quietly near lane 10, watching. None of them spoke. None of them felt the need to. They weren't here to compete anymore. They were here to witness, to learn. Keanu loaded 5 rounds, stepped into position, 3 shots, pause, 2 shots, reset. It wasn't showy, it wasn't loud, but every single movement carried weight. Even the way he breathed was precise. A quiet exhale, timed between trigger pulls like punctuation marks in a sentence only he could read. A new instructor, fresh from a different base, had arrived that week. His name was Nolan, and he was used to taking charge, used to barking orders and filling silences with lessons. But even he fell quiet as he noticed the way the entire range seemed to revolve around that one lane in the back corner. He watched Keanu shoot for 10 minutes before whispering to Reggie, "Who trained him?" Reggie didn't answer right away. Then he said, "No one. He trained himself, and the rest of us just got lucky enough to show up afterward." Nolan nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected to. Midway through the session, Keanu stepped back, unloaded his pistol, took a sip from his thermos. His movements were as fluid as water, as grounded as stone. He sat down on the old plastic chair beside the bench, elbows on his knees, and stared downrange. Not at the target, but past it, like always. Reggie finally stepped forward. He didn't speak. He just placed the box of ammo gently on the bench. Keanu gave him the briefest of nods, the kind that says, "I see you. I appreciate you. Now let's get back to work." The silence was different now. Not tense, not reverent, just right. Everyone found their places. No one needed to be told what to do. They knew. They felt it. And in the rhythm of each shot, in the way Keanu loaded and stepped, fired and paused, they understood they were part of something they might never fully define, but would never forget. By the end of the hour, no one clapped. No one cheered. But as Keanu packed up and headed for the door, every head lifted, every set of eyes followed him. Not for the fame, not for the movies, but for the lesson that greatness doesn't need to be loud, that mastery isn't about ego, that strength can be quiet, still, and humbling. Outside, the morning sun had finally crept over the ridge. The gravel crunched under his boots as he walked away. Behind him, Lane 7 stood empty, but never silent. Later that week, the range staff made a quiet decision. They framed one of Keanu's spent targets, the one with the single ragged hole in the center, and mounted it on the back wall of the break room, just above the coffee machine. Beneath it, in clean black letters, they added a simple caption: 1 hole, 5 shots, no words. It wasn't there for decoration. It was there as a reminder that excellence isn't about noise. It's about presence, discipline, and showing up when no one's clapping. Keanu didn't know they'd done it. He never lingered, never wandered the halls. But everyone else saw it, and they carried it with them. That Friday afternoon, after the last round had been fired and the gear was packed away, Reggie stayed behind. He wasn't there to shoot. He just sat at the end of lane 5, watching the light shift through the dusty windows. When he finally stood, he walked over to lane 7, stood just outside the red line, and stared downrange like Keanu always did. His Glock stayed holstered. His hands rested quietly on the barrier. He didn't need to prove anything, not anymore. Moments later, Cruz joined him, then Finn, then Mason. No one said a word. They didn't have to. In the silence, they each relived it. The first time they'd mocked the man in the flannel shirt. The first time they heard those shots land like a heartbeat. The way their world shifted in the space between 5 perfect rounds. They stood there a while, shoulder to shoulder, students of something deeper than marksmanship. Then Reggie, almost to himself, said, "I think that guy's changed the way I see everything." Mason nodded. "Same here." And in the stillness of that empty range, with nothing but the smell of spent brass and oil lingering in the air, they finally understood. This was never about shooting. It was about how you carry yourself. When no one sees, when no one's handing out medals, when respect has to be earned in silence. And Keanu Reeves, the quiet man in lane 7, had given them that lesson not with words, but with every shot, every breath, every unshaken step toward the target.